Hi everybody, my name is Rick and I've been part of the CIS Critical Security Controls editorial panel for many years and was part of the editorial panel for version 8. This is my series on each of the 18 controls and doing a deep dive into the things that have changed between 7 and 8. This is the 9th in my series, so we're halfway there. I'll have a link in the description for my videos on 1 through 8, and also a link to the CIS Critical Security Controls where you can download your own copy to follow along at home. So today we're talking about control number 9, email and web browser protections. This is the way that most people interact with the internet and with people outside their organization. And so it moved down 2 spots from version 7. It was control 7 and now it's control 9, but again it's still in the top 10. We went from 10 sub-controls to 7, and I'll just explain how we did that. And this was one that was really another one-to-one. In fact, I think all of the ones from 7 moved over into version 8, and we'll get into a deep dive right now about that. So let's bring up version 8 over here and version 7 over here, and let's kind of get right to it. Remember, we renamed subcontrols to safeguards, and we reordered them based on the implementation group. 9.1 you see is taken directly from 7.1, ensure use of only fully supported browsers and email clients. 9.2 taken from 7.7, use DNS filtering service, and you see this one moved up because it was an implication to group 1 over here, and so we moved it up to number 2 over here, so they line up nice and clean. Implementation group 1, 2, and 3 safeguards. For 9.3, we kind of combined 7.4, maintain and enforce network-based URL filters, and 7.5, subscribe to URL categorization service. In 9.4, it's based on 7.2, but instead of disable, we say restrict unnecessary, unauthorized browser email client extensions. So disable kind of alludes to the fact that it's already there, and restrict, says prevent it from being there, and if it's there, disable it. 9.5, implement DMARC, is taken from 7.8, but we kind of dropped the enable receiver-side verification since we didn't want to have 2 asks per safeguard. And 9.6, block unnecessary file types, is taken directly from 7.9, and 9.7, deploy and maintain email server malware anti-malware protection, is a rewording of and kind of reclassification of 7.10 sandbox all email attachments. We debated whether this one, 9.3 URL filtering, 9.5 DMARC, is something more of a control 13 network monitoring and defense kind of category. But, since it's in the perimeter or in the cloud. But we figured that it'd be more appropriate here because this is where it'd be audited, is like, what are we doing for email protections and web protections? And then finally, what we didn't bring over from version 7 is we moved and integrated 7.3 into 2.7 on allow list of authorized scripts in the software asset management, and we moved 7.6 log all URL requests to 8.7, which I talked about last week, collect URL audit logs, since that's in logging and monitoring. So now I know the changes. Let me put these down and let me bring up the details to control number 9. This is one of the rare times where we don't start with the development of a process, since this control is more about secure configuration. These would be safeguards, based on processes that would be developed in like the secure configuration control or vulnerability management or audit log management would all kind of end up in things that would be put into here. 9.1 instructs to only use supported, approved, and up-to-date browsers and email clients. You heard in my control number 4 discussions that out-of-date and unsupported software is a huge risk, and that these are 2 of the most used applications by users in the organization, so keep them up to date and make sure they're the right ones. 9.2 use DNS filtering service. This is to block known malicious domains and sites and to prevent users from visiting those websites and to block email coming from those domains. And 9.3 URL filters, like DNS, combines the blocking of access to malicious sites, but goes further than 9.2, as you might block categories of sites based on your organizational policies. So these might be categories like gambling, porn, freeware, peer-to-peer file sharing, that servers that are in specific countries that you may want to block. Pretty much anything you don't want your employees to do during the workday. 9.4, restricting email and browser extensions. This includes plugins and add-ons applications. These can sometimes be malicious themselves, and they're often installable without admin access. We refer to these as the cute name of PUPs, potentially unwanted programs, but usually they're not so cute. 9.5, implement DMARC. We pretty much kept the language from version 7 in the details about the sender policy framework and the DKIM options for protecting emails and spoofing and things like that. And 9.6, block unnecessary file types. This is for email, where you might not allow file extensions like, executables or scripts or batch files that would execute upon opening, or some people don't want zip files or RAR files or compressed, or programming system files like jars or DLLs or APKs or others. So we say to define a list of those that you don't really want that could be harmful to the organization. 9.7, deploy email server anti-malware. We didn't say server anti-malware scanning before. This time we reference approaches like sandboxing and attachment scanning. Pretty much all email gateway tools do this now. Sandboxing is where a file is executed in a separate virtual environment and its behavior is watched and logged to see if it's malicious. These are handy because you can get indicators out of them and from the malware analysis that it does and put them into your controls later. Where attachment scanning is just running the file through an anti-malware tool to see if it's known to be bad. And both of these are options. And in version 7 we said about sandboxing. Here we just say have some anti-malware protections to give you the option to do one or the other, or both. Most large organizations do both. Malware scanning is faster than sandboxing, but obviously sandboxing is more comprehensive. Though, just a disclaimer, malware has gotten smarter over the years to know it's in a sandbox sometimes, and it may not execute or it may behave in a different manner. So, your mileage may vary, but it's still a good thing to do. Not saying that just because there's a possibility to get around it doesn't mean not to do it. It's still a best practice to do. Take that down and bring up the upfront material. So on page 1, we expanded the overview to include improved protections and detections of threats from email and web vectors, where in version 7 we just said minimize the attack surface and opportunities. In the why this control is critical, we talk about the importance of email and web protections because they are the direct interaction to the users, and they are the main means for which users interact with people and systems outside of the organization. So they're a great threat vector. This becomes opportunities to spoof or social engineer the users to disclose credentials or sensitive data, or just be a vector for malware. We also talk about moving away from full-featured email clients like Outlook to the use of more web-based email, mobile email, or these clients that don't have the full embedded security features that an email client would normally have. So even something as simple as having a report phishing button encourages users to report when they are phishing. So if you don't have that because on the mobile app it doesn't have that button option, people have to send it to a specific email and may be less inclined to now I have to take this and forward it to a certain email address instead of just saying, click, I think this is malicious. So we're just saying that this is something to think about, that as your users are not all sitting at desk with full featured email clients with all these features and with, anti-malware on the endpoint, that consider that there are other kind of risks to that. In procedures and tools, we split up web browser and email. So starting with the web browser section, we talk about ways attackers can exploit browsers with malicious web pages or getting users to install malicious browser or plugins or extensions. We talk about browser configurations to prevent users from installing these PUPs. Remember I talked about PUPs before? As well as blocking the execution of certain code. We'll go to page 2. We continue to encourage using the browser configuration hardening to block known malicious sites and using pop-up blockers. And we close the web section by enforcing the use of the DNS filtering services. In the email section, we start by talking about good education, and we'll detail more about that in Control 14 on user education and the threat of business email compromise. An example of business email compromise is when someone is spoofing the CEO's email to tell the CFO to wire money immediately to an outside account, or when a company's email is compromised and it tells a customer of theirs to change the bank account to where the victim receives their payment. These are business email compromise. Very, very popular. Be aware of it. We talk about the use of spam filtering and malware scanning at the email gateway, which is pretty standard now. Both Office 365 and Google Mail do this kind of natively, though third-party tools maybe are more comprehensive and more configurable. We talk about DMARC for reducing spam and phishing further. We suggest installing encryption tools for secure email and communications. Being able to send an email securely to somebody outside the organization is an important business capability to have. We mentioned blocking email based on sender and blocking certain file types, like I mentioned before. And we close by talking again about user education. This time about using phishing testing, which is very popular now against the users. And interestingly, in this one, we spell out spam as an acronym. I didn't know it was an acronym. It stands for something posing as email. All right, well, if you learned nothing in this video, maybe you learned that. Okay, so that kind of wraps up control number 9. Hopefully this was helpful to you, and you see the changes from version 7 to version 8 in control 9. Little sequence there for your number files. If you haven't already, go ahead and download your copy of the controls from CISsecurity.org. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to sign up for the workbench on CISsecurity.org, where you can participate and you can provide comments and get feedback from the people who develop it. And other than that, feel free to leave me a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hi everybody, as I've said before, I have no pets to share, but I do have a lot of quirky artwork. This is a piece by the same artist as last week, with a clay head, a candlestick base, spoon arms, and what's here to be sheep on their head. Hope you enjoy. Have a great day.